So, what role does language play in the story everyday use?
Well, from Nancy Tutton's point of view, she just talks about how language is capable of being misused, and that's seen through Dee. Dee is obviously misusing language because she oppresses Mama and Maggie by trying to force ideas with her language.
And how she reads to them. She would
Yes.
to them without mercy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Tutton also says that Mama overcomes that by, in her actions toward Dee
because
and
silence
Maggie.
is more important than misusing language, because if you misuse language, then that's detrimental, that's bad, and like.
Exactly.
But then on the other hand, if you think about language, Mama is the most vocal character in the entire story because it's her voice that tells the story. She's the narrator. And so in that respect, she, as Susan Farrell put it, she's the one who's shaping the story.
Yeah. And that's where the critics argue or disagree, because Nancy Tutton says that although she is the narrator, she still doesn't have a voice in the beginning, and she grows slowly into having power in her narrative and having power in being able to objectify the situation and act on it.
And then I've also seen or heard about being talked about how the tenses of the words are used.
Yeah.
I don't know, how does that play a role?
Well, Sam Witsit argues that her change from present tense to past tense after the name scene gives her a greater hold of the story because she's able to distance herself from the story and look at it from an objective point of view.
And that's exactly what Nancy Tutton also says.
Rather than being under Dee's voice, she has her own through her actions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, moving on, some of the most common opinions.
Well, another scene that we can talk about is the name scene. A lot of critics talk about that, especially in Nancy Tutton's article. She explains how that is the point where the tense changes from past to present to past tense, giving her, because that's the first moment where she really gets angry at Dee because she notices that Dee has pushed away her familial identity.
Change her name? That's what her grandmother was named, and before that. But at the same time, you still see the oppression that Maggie is, or not Maggie, but Dee is trying to fight against by changing her name, is there in that name being Dee as well, because Mama even says she could trace the name back beyond the Civil War, in a way admitting that there is that oppression there that exists.
Well, I know a lot of critics question the validity of Dee's actions and the way she has changed her view of heritage.
Like if that's good or if that's bad. And I know that one article brought in Alice Walker's intent on that, saying that she's trying to say that this new Back to Africa movement is not the right way to go, because you have to think about the American heritage as well in that.
Whereas there were elements of that were important, but that by going to one extreme, that same article where the critic argues going to that one extreme is too much, where you can't completely ignore the past 200 years of history in America, and that helped shape also who they were as African Americans.
Well, I think a confusing part in the story that a lot of critics bring up is when Dee first gets out of the car, when she gets to the house and she starts taking pictures, and she wants to make sure that she gets the house in all its rustic glory in the picture with Mama and Maggie.
I think that plays in a lot to the quilting scene, the quilt scene, whereas why is she doing this is a question that critics always ask. Well, is she doing it because she's stuck up and wants to move beyond and wants to show how much she's grown and is no longer rustic?
I'm no longer part of this rustic house and this old time family. Like I put these pictures on my new beautiful house wall next to the quilt that adds to.
Or is she, she wants, by showing this heritage, is she, standing up for it in a way? Like, look this is who I am.
Well, I think she would like to think that, you know, she's doing this out of, you know, oh, I'm proud of my family, but it's really just more to feed her ego, usually.
Well, I think a lot of critics think that, and that's where the debate comes in, because they say, you know, some critics just definitely believe that Dee is the one that is in the wrong, and no, your idea of heritage and how you are, you know, presenting it is wrong. But I don't even know where I was going with this.
Well,
Yeah.
well, I think a lot of critics criticize Dee, but they look at her, they don't see Walker as looking at her as really unsympathetic, because she realizes as like an African American that, you know, it's hard to get a grasp of your culture because of like all the, you know, oppression that they faced. And
Yeah.
There's even some of the critics who say that like Dee's trying, you know, she wants to have this heritage, but she's blind to it, you know. She doesn't realize that this African heritage needs to be mixed with the American heritage. She doesn't realize
That the American heritage is just as important as your
and her
African
familial heritage as well is.
And that was one of the things that Susan Farrell noted too, was that yes, Dee was, you know, she kind of went about it the wrong way, but her motives were there. That, you know, when she read to Mama, it was because she wanted her to come to that place beyond the timidness and everything, to get to have a better understanding, and that the only way that Dee knew how was to try to educate her. And maybe her attitude in doing it wasn't the best way to go about it, but her motives were correct.
So just to recap, the scenes that seem to be coming up a lot is the quilt scene, the name scene, the scene when she's taking the pictures.
We also talk about the tenses and the characterization of Mama, Maggie, and Dee, as well as part of all that.
And we definitely have a lot of debates going on without any sort of solution. I guess it's just up to the reader how they feel about the story and who they want to.
And the most important thing to note is that their critical approaches really change how they view everything, you know. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
This has been a great discussion.
And good night from LTWR 300B.